Did anyone happen to notice two different conifers or evergreen trees? And if you don't know their names, you can just point to them if you see them. All right, so the ones that I kind of set you up to see here. There is a jack pine here to my left, and then there is also a white pine right there. And the tree that I was standing next to when you were reading was a white pine also. So they're a little different than the deciduous trees. They don't drop their needles, which are also leaves. They're just really tiny. They don't drop them every year, but they do, in fact, drop them. And you might notice this if you have a pine in your yard. You'll see the dead orange needles on the ground. So what exactly is going on is, depending on species, every 2 to 5 years they'll drop their needles. So it's kind of hard to see on this one and this one, they've already lost their needles that they're going to lose this year. But if you look closely, you can see some orange needles dispersed in that tree. If you turn around, there's a jack pine over here that's got lots of orange needles still on it that are going to drop. And so pines drop their needles every 2 to 5 years, and they're able to keep them during the winter. If you've noticed, the pine needles are a lot darker than most leaves are in green color, and that just means that they have more chlorophyll in them. So it's easier for them to use what available sunlight there is in the winter to continue doing photosynthesis. Now, because there is less sunlight, they're not going to grow as fast in the winter, but they do still photosynthesize during the winter. And also, they are coated in a waxy covering that helps prevent water loss, and they're very small. That also helps prevent water loss compared to oak leaves or maple trees. Another cool thing about pine trees is they are not pollinated by insects. If you could take a guess as to what they might be pollinated by or how they pollinate, raise your hand if you might have a guess. Anybody? I'll give you a hint. If you've ever looked around in the end of March, early May, you've been out walking and you see puddles covered in yellow, that's pine pollen. So there's a lot of it out at that time. They actually are pollinated by the wind rather than insects. So they have lots of little tiny pollen that floats around from the wind. And if you've ever noticed the film on your car or on your shoes when you're out walking around the puddles, it's because the pollen is just being blown around by the wind. Another interesting thing about pines is that they disperse their seeds by cones, and this is different than a oak, which uses a nut like an acorn, or a apple tree, which uses a fruit and it has its seeds inside. Cones are pretty interesting. Actually, if I could have card 1 read their card aloud, please.
In 1956, the university began purchasing pieces of property north of campus. The land was enjoyed by students and faculty as a new picnic area located within natural setting. Several times fires were lit by careless travelers, flicking cigarettes out of their windows and burned through the natural area. Students from the university conservation department were more than happy to abandon their studies in favor of fighting forest fires.
Now, I transitioned from cones into that little bit about fires, and it might seem weird, but what's really cool about jack pine cones is that they are serotinous, which means that they disperse their seeds through an environmental factor, which they choose fire. So if later on, if you want to check out a jack pine cone up close, I have some at my last stop. But they stay closed and on the tree until they are opened by intense heat, which usually is fire. So that's serotinous cones. And there's different plants that do that, not just the jack pine. So that was one of the cool things about jack pine cones. Now we're going to move on to our next tree. And if I could have you maybe look around on the ground or around you for the clues to what tree we might talk about next, I'll give you a hint as to what it might be. It's not only our nation's favorite tree, but it's a squirrel's favorite tree. And that might have given it away. But follow me.